Hi, everyone. My name is Katka Reszke, and I'm the director of the ReelAbilities Film Festival, which is presented by Boston Jewish Film. Today, we partnered with Boston University and the BU Arts Initiative to bring you two fascinating documentaries, The Unconditional and Me, My Mouth, and I. And I want to thank you for tuning in, and I want to welcome our two very special guests with me here. Maureen Finnerty is a dancer, artist, actress, a teaching artist, and a member of the ReelAbilities Advisory Committee. Welcome. And Dr. Josefine Wagner is an education scholar and a researcher in disabilities rights, and currently a fellow at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. Welcome.
Hi.
Hi, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
All right. Josefine, I want to ask you first, you are not personally involved in the production of The Unconditional, but you've done some extensive research. You've studied the film. Can you talk a little bit about how the film actually came about?
Yes, sure. So I find really intriguing when reading about the production of a film that there's a personal connection between the filmmaker, Dave Adams, and his wife, who have been friends with the Krakowiak family. So actually there was, if I'm right, the producer of David Adams' wife, Renee Adams, she was college roommates with Maria Krakowiak and got to know about the story of their children. And so they, I would say, probably developed together this idea of creating a documentary film that is, trying to be as respectful and as dignified of the lives of everyone involved in the family, and in order to capture what it's like to live with children whose disabilities are undiagnosed, but who, do a job of still being, a part of society, and especially like the film's ethnographic techniques of going into community life really make it possible to get to know the characters of the production. And so you get to know Lee and Leighton in very personal ways, and the distressing and at times also like helpless situations, as well as the interests of both of the children and the way they perceive life around them. So I think it's this genre of verite film that is kind of a truth for camera that tries to combine like improvisation as well as artistic means, like the camera angles, the music. It's just a very interesting way of depicting life, and also of adhering to this, battle cry of the disability rights movement of nothing about us without us. So, we get to see the life of this family, but get to see it, through their perspectives, through their eyes, and we kind of inside of their homes. And I think this breaks a specific tradition of displaying disability as something that is within medical facilities only, that is only through the gaze of expert knowledge. And so I think this is an interesting way how The Unconditional is breaking with a tradition of pathologizing disability.
Yeah. So speaking of nothing about us without us, right. Me, My Mouth, and I is very much that genre of a film, and I want to ask you, Maureen, about that film and how it connects to you in a more personal way. Jess Tom, at some point in the film, says she defines disability as the lived experience of barriers. And I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about your personal experience of breaking through some of those barriers in your artistic career, especially as a playwright at first, and then by finding your place in theater later on in life, both as a performer and as an educator.
Well, as a child, I participated in many arts groups, but as I got older, and with the help of many people, I got to see that my disability was not something to be hidden away and not talked about, but it actually gave me options that other people didn't have. It's like when I dance, I have more options than other people have. It's like if you were a painter and there was all of a sudden you woke up and there's a brand new color. Well, my wheelchair did that for me because I couldn't make it do things, and other dancers didn't have a wheelchair, so they didn't have that option. So I think watching the film, it also showed me that she accepted her disability and she didn't let society definition of disability or society's belief in disabilities to stop her from being who she was and just being out there. And that's what I tried to do when I act and I dance.
Incredible. We have a question from the audience. Thank you for such wonderful films. Do you see common threads between the two films, and can you speak to that? I want to start with you, Josefine. Do you want to?
Sure. I would say that, one of the common threads is the way that both films are actually, giving a lot of agency to the main characters, and they are like intimate depictions of life at home as in society. I would say that the unconditional is a very is kind of different from Me, My Mouth and I, because conventional ways of communication cannot be used by the children to express themselves, right? So in that film, actually, like music and like distorted rhythms are actually kind of underlying or the background to some of the filmic impressions that we receive. And I think it's very interesting how it makes us perceive the world that Kobe and Leighton encounter, and kind of understands also how each of the viewer has a very different way of understanding the story that is told. And so I think that the unconditional needed to also place like a lot of emphasis on other ways of perception, like studies of the way that the children perceive touch, the way that they feel like soap bubbles touching their face, and hearing like the sounds of the mobile at the window, and how we as like the audience who observe this make sense of these interactions. And I like how that reminds us of like everybody is individual, humanity, and like diversity is something that is just something that is like a human feature, instead of this one way of understanding content or expressing interest, expressing affection. And that is something that I feel kind of very connected to when I saw The Unconditional.
So it's the notion of communication and in general, right? And I think that, I mean, what struck me when I was watching The Unconditional was really the idea of how the children are listened to so well by the parents and the community. And I don't know if you want to speak, Maureen, more about the communication aspect before we move on, because I also want to ask you about a common thread that I noticed that strikes me in both films, which is isolation.
One thing I want to say about communication, I think both films show you that communication doesn't always have to be verbal.
Right.
I mean, you get to know what someone is feeling or thinking, but you could tell what the kids liked and didn't like. That was a form of communication. Or if someone was staring at her in the film or looking at her when she did her tics, that was their form of communication to her, even if they didn't speak. So communication doesn't always have to be verbal. Everybody has a voice. I think that was one of the messages in the film.
I also would like to just comment on the way that in both films and just claim like space of society. And I think that, you know, these episodes within school where, you know, their names were known, they were not erased from public consciousness. You know, the children were there, they were interacting with their peers, they were learning, they were shown in classrooms and in interaction, and just as much in her theater company. And I just felt like that this is, you know, envisioning what it would be like if it wasn't so difficult to climb like these barriers of being part of, you know, mainstream life, basically.
And that's exactly what I think about isolation, which is what again what another quote from Jess Tom, which I memorized from the film. It's isolation isn't inevitable, that we're only as isolated as our community will make us. And that's, I think, something that really comes out of both films, is that the kids both you know, because of the way their parents navigate their lives and within the community they live in, do not isolate them. But also, obviously, just as Tom's whole entire life and work and advocacy for not isolating people in art and people in arts, and fighting for universal inclusion and universal participation in the arts. And that's something also, Maureen, that you do through your work. And you work with people with disabilities and without disabilities.
Yes.
In theater.
And we frequently have to make sure that we balance what the audience perceptions of us is going to be with what our artistic forms wants to be. One time we were creating a piece and we wanted to put all the crutches and wheelchair pieces in a pile and then crawl off the stage. But we were like, no, we can't do that, because then the people in the audience will want to come and help us and will misinterpret what we're trying to say, and they'll start to pick up things, and that will disturb the art. So you have to take a balance between performing, because I want to be seen as an artist, not a disabled person first. I want to be seen as an artist first. But I also have to take into consideration that when I go out on the stage, people are automatically, I can't hide my disability, it's there. So how am I going to present it so that they can see the art first and the disability second?
Well, we have a fantastic question from a viewer. If someone wanted to get involved with work like Maureen's locally in Boston, where do they go?
Well, I'm involved in several things. So if you're a child, you can go to Partners for Youth with Disabilities, and it has a website, and do their Access to Theater program. And if you're an adult, you can go into the Until Tomorrow production website, and we have a adult program called All Voices Count, where we do more mature art. So those are the two places you can go. And they're also they're located in Boston, 89 South Street and 230 Stewart Street.
All right, fantastic. There's a question, I think, Josefine, more for you. Do you know if they are any closer to finding the diagnosis for the two children in the unconditional?
From what I've seen and read, I don't think so. And I think there have been, I've actually followed an exchange between different parent groups on the film, and it has been mentioned that there are like, you know, parent help groups, or, you know, kind of expressions of solidarity among different families in the way of how to, you know, maybe find therapeutic measures that would be helpful to Colby and Leighton, or maybe just, you know, shared experiences on, on maybe more of the challenging parts of life. If I could, I maybe just say something shortly about isolation, since you brought that topic up. Sure. Yeah. So I think like it's, you know, a very suitable, you know, comment for right now, because we experience isolation very strongly in, you know, this pandemic time, and this is maybe bringing us a little bit closer to understanding what it feels like for people whose children are not allowed into mainstream education. For example, in Poland, there's a lot of individual education for children who are too disabled to go to school. And I have been interviewing parents and teachers, and they have shared with me that, you know, children have to be sometimes medicated against depression because they do not get to see their peers, because there are not possibilities or, a shift of mindset among teachers or pedagogues, to build these bridges across the differences of children. And I think that, it's one thing to build like a ramp so that wheelchair users can enter our buildings. And it's another thing to change like the shift of saying disability does not belong to the margins of society, but it belongs, into our classrooms. And we have to start thinking of pedagogical ways to, allow for different perception and different ways of communicating. So, I just think that this might be a way of feeling like solidarity across that and really push for a broader understanding of, different able people and, building a community where everyone is welcome.
We had a question earlier that I missed about how many live performances of Mouth there were and what Just Tom's current projects are. I can just tell people that that they should follow Tourette's Hero online, because that's where Jess's whole projects live online. She has a great Twitter account, and she has a presence on Facebook, and that's where, and obviously a website, and that's where everybody can find out about more about Me, My Mouth, and I, and her current projects. And probably more about her performances. She did perform Mouth in New York, actually fairly recently. And I think that's when it closed, just several months ago. So I don't know when the newer performances are going to be happening. And that's to answer that question. Can we go back a little bit to the idea of the children and this notion of that comes up in the film, to some degree, of what's a life worth living. I don't want to get too depressing, but I think that the unconditional. If there's a message from this film. Which I sort of don't like the idea of talking about messages coming from film. I think we've had this conversation before, Josefine. But if there's a message coming from this film, is that is really not the question that we should be asking, and that's a dangerous question, I think, to ask. And obviously, all of your work that you've done historically in Nazi Germany, and these are questions that were asked before dangerously in history. Can you just pick that up from me?
Sure.
I'm not really asking a question.
I think what I'm frustrating about the film in the first place was it restored the individuality of the two children and portrayed it so nicely, and bring us to a darker period of history. We have seen in the 1930s a lot of Nazi propaganda films that were shown to the German public to elicit consent in, eugenic cleansing measures. So we've seen that display, if we pay attention to how dogs are being bred, and then we should also pay attention to who, in order, to predict the gene pool and to eradicate disabled people, or even this racial cleansing idea. And in 1933, the law on the prevention of hereditary ill offspring was released, and in 1935 the Nuremberg race laws, which were significantly targeted at striping citizen rights of Jewish people, and 33 is certainly of sterilizing and even eventually transferring people with disabilities to killing wards. And we know between 1939 and 1945, 5,000 children died in child euthanasia. So these propaganda films, we don't know 100% their impact, but we know that they were used to recruit to recruit personnel for these wards and these institutions, and to completely dehumanize people with disabilities and to other them and to display them as disposable. So this is, we've passed this, and this is yet something that I think so many layers of society were involved in this construction, disabled life as life unworthy, that it's interesting, it's really important to look today at how we have changed this, this rhetoric, get away from this perspective of deficiency and deficit, and that we understand, a different way of looking at human expression than, this dichotomy between healthy and sick and disabled and non-disabled, and that we, go, a diversity of human expression. So what I really enjoyed about this film, The Unconditional, is the way that it abstains from judgment. And it says, let's listen to the life and to the melody that comes from these children, and let's not, judge that we know, everything, every layer of consciousness, every possibility of grasping life. So that's what I feel as well, because it helps me, it helps everyone to be, freed of some kind of perfect idea that we need to adhere to, because that doesn't exist anyways. And I loved when Maureen and I were talking about the film, how you actually said that it is about, I don't know, I don't want to talk for you, but do you remember how you put it, what this film means to you? It's to you about?
I don't remember what I said when I was talking to you.
Oh yeah, no problem. You were talking about how it is, that it is about the parents accepting the children for who they are.
Social acceptance.
Yeah.
I connected with that when I got my first wheelchair. My parents threw a party, and they called it my independence party. And they invited all the kids in the neighborhood to come and sit in the chair and get to know what it was like, so they'd have the feeling, so they wouldn't be scared of it, because everybody's scared of the unknown. And they presented the chair to me as, this is not something that shows your disability. This is something that gives you independence. And that's how they wanted me to show my parents said, we don't know why you came in this package, but this is the package you came in. You're not broken, and the wheelchair is just a form of independence. So go out and show the world what you can do with it. But it was that kind of thinking. And I think their parents, I think you go through a point when you have a kid, because nobody knows what their kid's going to be like. And you go to a point of you want your kid to win the Nobel Prize or whatever. But once you reach your point of acceptance, you can then truly see who your kid is and listen to your kid, just like the parents in the first film did.
Wow, I think that's a perfect note on which we can end today, and give everybody a really good send off to a peaceful weekend in this really unpeaceful times that we're living in right now. I want to thank you so much for being with us today. That's it was really beautiful. Thank you so much for your comments on the two films. I want to, on behalf of myself and the ReelAbilities team and the entire Boston Jewish Film, I want to wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom and a very healthy and peaceful weekend. Thank you all so very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.